Hello students. So we have studied about pollination. We have studied about self-pollination and cross-pollination. The types of self-pollination are autogamy and geitonogamy, and cross-pollination is called as allogamy or xenogamy. We have studied about the contrivances for self-pollination, that is the adaptations that the flowers make to favor self-pollination, and the contrivances for the cross-pollination, that is the adaptations that the flowers make to favor cross-pollination. Right? Cross-pollination requires some external agencies which will help in the cross-pollination. Cross-pollination is transfer of the pollen grains from anther of one flower of one plant to the stigma of another flower of another plant. So there should be some need of an agency, right? That agency can be a biotic agency or an abiotic agency. So abiotic components include wind and water, right? Those are the abiotic agencies which will help in pollination, and biotic agencies will include animals. So they can be different kind of animals, insects, birds. These are all the biotic agencies, biotic components which will help in the pollination. So first we will study how the abiotic agencies will help in the pollination. We will start with anemophily. What is anemophily? Pollination by wind is called as anemophily. Right? So air currents or the wind currents are helping in the pollination, that is transfer of the pollen grains. Such type of pollination is called as anemophily. Now you have to study what are the characteristic features that a flower, that is an anther or a pistil, should have to favor anemophily, that is they will help in this process of anemophily. So what are the requirements to favor anemophily? Right? The first one, see, the anthers should be exposed anthers. See students, remember one thing, that because wind currents are helping in pollination, are involved in pollination, the direction of wind is, we cannot predict what is the direction of the wind. So there is it depends upon the chance factor that the pollen grains will come and rest on the stigma, right? So if the direction of wind is proper, then the pollen grains will come and rest on the stigma. If it is not proper, then there will be wasting of lots of pollen grains. So this wind factor which is helping in pollination is a chance factor, right? So what are the different things which are required to favor anemophily? Exposed anthers, right? See, if the anthers are present below the flowers, or if those are not well exposed, then the pollen grains which are released by the dehiscence of the anther will not be carried away by the wind currents. So for carrying the pollen grains by the wind currents, the anthers should be well exposed, right? Say for example, this is the stem, right? And this is the flower, right? And this is the leaves, and over here is the flower. Say if the flower is below the leaf, if the flower is below the leaf, right, then the pollen grains which are released will be trapped below the leaves, right? So where should the flower be present? Where should the anther be present? The anther should be well exposed, right? So these are the anthers, right? So if the anthers are well exposed, right, then it would be easy for the wind currents to carry the pollen grains, right? So anthers should be exposed, right? Well exposed anthers are required so that wind currents can easily carry the pollen grains, right? So this is the first thing which is required. Then what kind of anthers are required? What kind of anthers are present in Anemophilous flowers? The anthers are versatile anthers. We have studied this, students. There is different position of the attachment of filament with anther, and based on it there are different types of anthers, right? Such as adenate anther, such as versatile anther, such as basifixed anther, dorsifixed anther. So Anemophilous flowers, typical feature of Anemophilous flowers is the presence of versatile anthers, right? So this is the filament, right? And this are the anthers which are attached to the filament, right? So the anthers, the such type of arrangement is called as versatile anthers. The anthers are dangling, right? So because those are dangling, so whenever the wind current will come, whenever the anthers are ready, the pollen grains will be dehiscized easily, and the wind currents will be able to take the pollen grains easily because the anthers are dangling anthers. Those anthers are called as versatile anthers, right? Then the third thing which is required is that the pollen grains should be light weighted, non-wettable and non-sticky, right? So the pollen grains which are released from these anthers, say if these pollen grains are very heavy weighted, then the wind currents will not be able to take the pollen grains to the desired destination. If the pollen grains are wettable, right? So whenever the pollen grains get wetted, it again becomes heavier. So they should be non-wettable and they should be non-sticky, right? If the pollen grains are sticky, then they will get stick to the areas which are not necessary, right? So pollen grains should be non-sticky pollen grains. These are the characteristics that the pollen grains should possess, right? Light-weighted, non-wettable, non-sticky. Then how much amount of pollen grains are required, right? Large amount of pollen grains are produced. Why? What is the need? Say for an example, right? One flower of cannabis produces 5 lakh pollen grains. 5 lakh pollen grains. What is the need of it, right? So because as I told you earlier also, that wind is an abiotic component. So direction of wind, you never know, right? So there are chances, there are probabilities that the pollen grains, lots of pollen grains will be wasted, right? That is why the production of pollen grains is also in a very large amount. A single flower of cannabis produces as high as 5 lakh pollen grains, and compared to it, the flowers which are favoring anemophily, right, they are possessing, the ovaries of such flowers are possessing only single ovule. So ovary is having single ovule will have single embryo sac, and a single embryo sac will have a single egg. Compared to the single egg, the pollen grains are produced in a very huge amount, right? So there is lots of wasting of pollen grains. But again, as I said, that is required because wind is the pollinating agent, right? So these are the factors which are required to favor anemophily. There are few more factors which are required, that is stamen, right? How a stamen should be, right? So stigma, right? Stigma which is going to receive the pollen grain should be sticky and feathery, right? So say this is the stigma, right? This stigma is going to receive the pollen grain, right? So if this stigma is either sticky or feathery or hairy, right, then it will be easily able to trap the pollen grains. So stigma should be sticky, feathery or hairy to easily trap the pollen grains, right? Stigma should possess this feature, right? What is not required for the flowers, right? The flowers can be non-ornamental, non-showy, without nectar glands, right? So the flower should not possess any ornamental properties. They should be non-showy, and they should not, there is no need of any nectar glands for the flowers, because the pollinating agent is wind. So there is no need that the flowers should be ornamental or showy flowers, right? Which are the flowers which undergo pollination by wind? Examples of anemophilous flowers are grasses, right? Most of the grasses undergo pollination by wind, right? So example is grasses, right? Then other example is wheat and rice, right? So these are the examples of anemophily. One more thing you have to remember is in gymnosperm, that is in pine, right? Pine is a gymnosperm, right? And what you can see in pine, the pollen grains possesses wings. And on the tree of the pine, what you will be able to see? You will be able to see that on the tree of the pine, there is a cloud of the pollen grains. That cloud of the pollen grains is called as sulfur cloud. It is a yellowish cloud of pollen grains possessing wings on pine tree. This is a typical feature, right? It is a yellowish cloud which is seen on the pine tree, and this pollen grains possesses wings, right? So what are the features which are required? The anther should be a well exposed anther. The pollen grains which are released should be non-wettable, light weighted, and they should be non-sticky pollen grains. The anthers are versatile anthers or dangling anthers. Right? Stigma should be sticky and feathery and hairy to trap the pollen grains. How much amount of pollen grains are produced? In a huge amount, because those pollen grains are wasted. Should the flowers be ornamental or showy, or should attract the other birds or insects for pollination? No, because the pollination is done by winds. The flowers are non-ornamental, they do not possess nectar glands. This is very important. Pine tree, which is a gymnospermous, right, possesses, their pollen grains possesses wings, and on the pine tree there will be a cloud of this pollen grains which is called as sulfur cloud. It is a yellowish cloud because the pollen grains are powdery, non-wettable and sticky, and they are revolving around the pine tree by the wind currents, right? So that is anemophily, pollination by wind. Our next topic is hydrophily. So the second abiotic component is water, right? That is pollination by water is called as hydrophily. Our next topic is hydrophily. What is hydrophily? Hydrophily is pollination by water, right? So again, it is an abiotic component, pollination by water, right? We have studied in lower animals, right, and in plants such as bryophytes, such as pteridophytes, such as algae, right, that water is the source of carrying the male gametes towards the female gametes, right, and it is very much useful over there. But hydrophily, that is pollination by water, is very uncommon, right? It is seen in only 30 genera of plants. This hydrophily is further divided into two types, right? That is epihydrophily and second is hypohydrophily, right? So pollination is done by water. Water is the pollinating agent. Epi means above and hypo means below. So if pollination takes place on surface of water, water is only helping in pollination, but where is pollination happening, right? Where is anthers? When are anthers getting attached to stigma? It is on the surface of water. That is called as epihydrophily. And when pollination takes place below the surface of water, that is within water, then that is called as hypohydrophily, right? We will study this with some examples, right? So first we will take hypohydrophily, that is pollination within, on the inner side, downside the water, right? Example of it is Zostera and Ceratophyllum. Zostera, we have studied that Zostera possesses longest pollen grain. That pollen grain is of 2500 micrometers in length, right? The pollen grains are needle-like pollen grains, right? So those are longest pollen grains and those are needle-like pollen grains without exine. Right? So we know pollen grains are surrounded by exine, which is made up of sporopollen. But here, Zostera, the pollen grains are longest, needle-like and without exine. Right? So how pollination occurs? Zostera is a dioecious plant, which means it possesses both male flowers also and female flowers also. And these male flowers and female flowers are present in clusters. Right? So say these are the stems of the plant. So this is the water body, right? This is the water. Say these are the clusters of the flowers and these flowers are male flowers. And here is the cluster of the flowers and these flowers are female flowers. So this plant is Zostera plant, right? And this plant, right, Zostera is a rooted submerged plant. Right? So pollination is occurring by water and below the surface of the water. So it is happening within water, on the inner side of water. Right? So now what happens? The male flowers are going to release pollen grains and the pollen grains are needle-like. So these are the pollen grains which are released by the male flowers. Now what will happen? These pollen grains are either going to get submerged, right? And those are going to placed on the surface, on the ground surface, or these pollen grains will float upside. These are the two possibilities, but it is not happening. In Zostera plants, the specific gravity of pollen grains is similar neither floats nor sinks, right? So the pollen grains are not going to sink also, neither it is going to float also, right? So it is going to remain in the water only at the same level. It is not going to float, neither it is going to sink. So these pollen grains, with the help of water currents, are going to reach towards the female flowers, and there will be pollination. So water is helping in the pollination, right? That is seen in Zostera plant, right? Needle-like pollen grains. The specific gravity of the pollen grains is similar to water. So the pollen grains are not going to float, nor it is going to sink. Those are going to flow with the water currents. Those are going to reach the female flowers, stick on the stigma of the female flowers, and thereby pollination occurs by water. But where it is occurring? On the surface of water? No, within the water body. That is why it is called as hypohydrophilic. Ceratophyllum. What happens in ceratophyllum? Right, so again, if removing this, say this is a plant of ceratophyllum only. Again, ceratophyllum is a dioecious plant, which means there will be male flowers present in clusters and female flowers also present in clusters, right? So what happens in ceratophyllum? Right, anther detaches from male flower. It reaches to the surface of water. There is dehiscence of anther, right, on the surface of water. Release of pollen grains, germination of pollen grains. So pollen tube will be formed. This will again sink and there will be pollination, right? So what will happen? These are male flowers. So the anthers are going to detach from the male flowers, right? So say these are the anthers which are detaching from the male flowers. Where are these anthers coming? These anthers are reaching the surface of water. When these anthers dehisce, the pollen grains are released on the surface of water. These pollen grains germinate, pollen tube is produced. Once pollen tube is produced, their weight becomes more. So now this pollen grains again sinks and it reaches to the female flowers, and thereby there will be pollination. So pollination occurs below the surface of the water, right? That is why it is also under the part of hypohydrophilic. That is pollination below the surface of water. Examples are Zostera and Ceratophyllum, right? So hydrophily is of two types, epihydrophily and hypohydrophily. Now we'll study epihydrophily. Examples of epihydrophily is Vallisneria. Vallisneria is a monoecious plant, which means there is a male plant and female plant, right? So say this is the ground surface of the water body and this is the upper surface of the water body, right? So this is the female Vallisneria plant, right? So this is the female Vallisneria plant and this are the female flowers, right? So this are the female flowers. This is the male Vallisneria plant. right? And this, I will say, male flowers, right? Now what happens in Vallisneria, right? This male flower detaches and reaches the surface of water, and it is made up of spadix and 3 tepals, right? So we will draw the structure of male flower, right? This is a male flower, right? So it is going to detach and it reaches to the surface of the water, right? So say this is the male flower which has reached to the surface of the water, right? Now these female flowers are coiled flowers, right? So actually how are these flowers? These flowers are completely coiled flowers, right? These flowers, now when the male flowers detaches, reaches the surface of water, there is dehiscence of the anther and there is release of the pollen grains from the anther of the male flower. At that time the female flower, which is a coiled flower, is going to uncoil, and this is the female flower, right? So this, there is uncoiling of the female flowers at the time of pollination, right? So female flowers uncoil to favor pollination, right? So thereby these pollen grains are going to reach towards the female flowers and there will be pollination. So where did the pollination took place? The pollination took place on the surface of the water body. That is why it is under the category of epihydrophily. Whereas in case of hypohydrophily, the pollination was taking place within the water body. Examples are Zostera and Ceratophyllum. Epihydrophily, the female flower is uncoiling. It is getting elongated and reaches on the surface of the water body. And the male flower detaches from the plant. This is the structure of the male flower. It reaches on the surface of the water body, release of pollen grains, and thereby pollination occurs by the water currents, right? There are some other plants, say for example water hyacinth, right? The name says it is a water, it is an aquatic plant, water hyacinth. It is also called as terror of Bengal. But in water hyacinth plant, the pollination does not occur by water. It is not a hydrophilic plant, right? The plant remains on the surface of water and either pollination is occurring by wind or by some insects or by some other mode. But water is not involved in the pollination in water hyacinth or water lily plant. So water lily, water hyacinth, the pollination is not done by water, right? So that is hydrophily, where pollination occurs by water. Epihydrophily, example is Vallisneria. Hypohydrophily, example is Zostera and Ceratophyllum. In Vallisneria, there is uncoiling of the female stalk and the female flower reaches the surface and there is detachment of the male flower. Whereas in case of Zostera, the specific gravity of the needle-like pollen grains is similar to water. So the pollen grains will remain within the water and the water currents will take the pollen grains to the female flower. Our next topic is entomophily. What is the meaning of entomophily? Entomophily means pollination by insects. So students, we have studied about the abiotic components which are helping in pollination, that is wind and water, and what are the specializations that the flowers possesses to adapt for the pollination by wind and water. That also we have studied. We have studied it with examples. Entomophily, pollination is done by insects, which means biotic components are helping in pollination. Right? What are the adaptations that the flowers should possess to favor pollination by insects? See students, pollination is done by insects. Now insects are not going to a particular flower for the purpose of pollination. Right? They are not going to the flowers for the purpose of pollination. So the flowers have to attract the insects for some other reason. So what are the adaptations that the flowers will make? So the flowers should be ornamental and brightly colored. Right? Flowers should be brightly colored and ornamental to attract insects. This is the first adaptation that the flower should make. If so, what there are different parts of the flowers which can be brightly colored. Either it can be petals, or it can be bract, or it can be sepals. Right? Any part of the flower should be brightly colored and ornamental to attract the insects. Right? Then second thing, right? In case of night blooming flowers, right? In night blooming flowers, say for example, jasmine. Jasmine is a night blooming flower. So at night, if jasmine flower want to attract the insects, then its property should not be showy or ornamental or brightly colored, because at night obviously the insects are not going to have that vision. Then what is the next property that the flower should possess? Then the flowers should possess scent or perfume. Right? So the smell should attract the pollinator. So in night blooming flowers, the smell should attract the pollinator. One more example we can take in Rafflesia flower. Right? This is very important. In case of Rafflesia flower, right? This Rafflesia flower is a very large flower. Right? It smells like a rotten flesh. It smells like a rotten flesh. Very important. So its smell is not good. It smells like a rotten vegetable or a flesh, right? But this kind of smell is attracting pollinators. Right? This type of smell is attracting pollinators. In case of Rafflesia flower, the carrier is flies and seed dispersal is done by elephant. This Rafflesia flower is a very large flower. Right? So we are studying about which are the properties that the flower should possess to favor entomophily, that is pollination by insects. So insects are not coming to the flowers for the purpose of pollination. They are not coming to the flowers so that they want to pollinate. They want to help that flowers for pollination. They are coming to the flowers for their own purpose. So what are the adaptations the flowers should make? The flowers should be either brightly colored, right? They should attract the insects. They should be ornamental, right? Any part of the flower, petals, sepals, bracts can be brightly colored, right? In case of night blooming flowers, right? Insects, the vision of insects at night will be very dim. So the flowers does not need to be ornamental or showy, but the plants, the flowers should emit a particular smell, whether it is a perfume or a scent or some rotten smell to attract the pollination. Say for example, in jasmine flower, it is emitting a beautiful, a good fragrance to attract the insects. Whereas in case of Rafflesia flower, the flower is a very large sized flower and it smells like a rotten flesh, and because of that smell, it is attracting the pollinators, right? Then which are the other adaptations that the flowers should make, right? The other adaptations includes, right, the flower should be conspicuous and easily visible to insects, right? In sunflower, many small flowers arranged together to look conspicuous, right? So the flowers should be conspicuous, they should be big, they should be attracting the insects. In case of sunflower, the flowers are very small, and that is why all the flowers are arranged in a specific inflorescence, right? All the flowers are arranged in a specific inflorescence to attract the insects in case of sunflower, right? So this kind of arrangement is there in case of sunflower, right? Then which are the other adaptations that the flower should possess? The flower should possess nectar glands to attract insects, right? To attract the insects, nectar gland should be present in the flower. Say this is the flower, right? Say this is the flower. Then this is ovary, style, stigma. These are the anthers of the flower. Then what the flower might possess? The flower might possess the hairy structure, which is called as nectar guide. It is called as nectar guide, which means it is going to guide the insect, right? Say this is the insect. This is the insect. So this nectar guide is going to guide the insect inside towards the nectar gland. So say this is the nectar gland. So insects are coming towards the flowers for the nectar. They want to suck the nectar from the nectar gland. So that is the purpose of the insect. So when the insect is getting into the flower for sucking the nectar guide is guiding the insect. When the insect is going inside the flower, the anthers are releasing the pollen grains, and those pollen grains are sticking on the body of the insect. When the same insect go to some other flower for the nectar gland, for the nectar, then that pollen grains will stick on the stigma of the other flower. Thereby insects are helping in pollination. So here the purpose of the insect was not to help for pollination. The insect came towards the flower in search of the nectar gland, but in response the insects have done the pollination for the flower. Then one more adaptation the flower can possess. Flower can possess edible pollen grains, right? So insects are coming towards the flower to eat the pollen grains, and in return insects are helping the flowers for the process of pollination. How? insects will come to one flower to eat the pollen grains, and in that course, the pollen grains will stick on the body of the insects. Right? When that same insect will go to some other flower again to eat the pollen grains, then those pollen grains will be sprinkled on the stigma of the other flower, and thereby it will help in cross pollination. Right? So these are the adaptations for ensuring pollination by insects that the flower should possess. Which are those? The flowers should be brightly colored, they should be ornamental, they should be showy. Right? Then second point, flowers should be conspicuous. They should be large and showy to attract the insects. If flowers are small, they will arrange themselves in such an inflorescence so that they will be easily appeared, such as in case of sunflower. Then in case of night blooming flowers, the flowers should release a particular smell of fragrance to attract the insects. In Rafflesia, the smell is like a rotten flesh which is attracting the insects, or which is attracting the flies. Flies are the carriers in case of Rafflesia, and dispersal of the seeds is done by elephant. Right? Then some other adaptations, flower can either possess nectar glands, and insects come to flower in search of the nectar to suck the nectar, and in return they help the flowers in pollination. Or the edible pollen grains are there in the flower. The flower possesses edible pollen grains, and insects are coming towards the flower for eating those pollen grains, and in response they are helping in pollination. Right? We will take some of the examples of entomophily, that how different insects are helping in case of pollination towards the flowers. So now we are going to study different examples of entomophily. Right? The first one, which all the examples we are going to study, that is pseudocopulation in case of orchid or ophrys. Second is hypanthodium type of the inflower. We are going to study the yucca flower, and the pollination is done by yucca cella moth. Then the third one is ficus carica, that is fig, and the pollination is done by blastophaga. Right? It is a wasp. Right? Then the fourth one which we are going to study is liver mechanism in case of salvia, which belongs to the Labiatae family. Right? These are some of the examples which we are going to study. The pollination is done by insects. Right? The first one is orchid ophrys. Right? So orchid is a flower. Right? It is called as ophrys. Right? The structure of the flower is as such. Right? The arrangement of the petals is as such that it resembles to the female moth. Right? So arrangement of petals resembles the female moth. So, right, the petals are such placed that it looks like it is a female moth. So, the male moth gets attracted towards them, thinking as a female moth. Right? So male moth is going to come attract towards the orchid, thinking as a female moth and trying to copulate with the female moth. Right? But actually it is a flower, orchid flower. Right? So when the male moth comes towards the flower, right, the pollen grains will stick on the body of the male flower. When the same male insect, moth, will go to the other flower, thinking it as a female moth, the pollen grains are going to be sprinkled on the stigma of the other flower. This process is called as pseudocopulation, right? So male moth is attracted towards the orchid flower, thinking it as a female moth and trying to copulate, and in favor, right, in return, the male moth is actually helping the flower for the cross pollination, right? Then second thing is in case of yucca flower. Second example is in case of yucca flower, right? See what happens. The moth is yucca cella moth and the flower is yucca flower, right? So this is the stigma, style and ovary of the flower, yucca flower. What will the moth do? The moth is going to drill this ovary from side, right? So it is going to drill the ovary from the side, and what it is going to insert inside it, it is going to lay. The yucca moth lies, right? So this is the drilled ovary. The yucca moth is going to lay the eggs in ovary, right? And it is going to seal the ovary with the pollen grains. Seal ovary with pollen grains of same yucca flower, right? So it is going to seal the ovary with the pollen grains of some other yucca flower. So both are having a mutual relationship. How is yucca moth benefited? Yucca moth got a place to lay its eggs in the ovary of the yucca flower, right? So the eggs are secured and those are protected, right? When the egg hatches, right? When the egg hatches, the larva feeds on ovary of yucca flower, right? And what is yucca flower getting in return, right? Because the seeds, right, the pollen grain is getting covering the this drilled portion is sealed with the pollen grains of some other yucca flower. Thereby the pollen grains from other flower has reached to this ovary. Thereby it is favoring cross pollination, right? So that is the example. Yucca flower and yucca cella moth both are benefited, right? Then the third example is of Ficus carica. It is called as fig plant, and this fig plant is having hype anthodium type of inflorescence. What is hype anthodium type of inflorescence, right? So its thalamus is very big. This is the thalamus of the fig flower, and within the thalamus over here are attached the male and female flowers, that is anther and pistils, right? So anther are positioned on the superior side. So this are the anthers, right? These are the male flowers, that is anthers, right? Then female flowers are present on the inferior side. These are the female flowers which possesses stigma, style and ovary. These are female flowers. Apart from male and female flowers, there are gall flowers which are present, right? So this is the gall flower, right? How are gall flowers? Gall flowers are the sterile female flowers. Those are sterile female flowers. Why those are sterile? Because you can see that a normal female flower, this is the ovary, this is the style and the stigma. This is the normal fertile female flower. Whereas in gall flower, the style is originating from the side of the ovary. This is gall flower. And it is sterile flower, right? So, this is a wasp, that is Blastophaga wasp. This wasp, right, say this is the wasp, right? This wasp is coming in this fig plant to lay its eggs in the gall flower. So, where is it going to lay the eggs? It is going to lay the eggs over here. These are the eggs which are laid by the Blastophaga wasp. So it comes inside, it lays its eggs in this space of the gall flower. So it is safely protecting its eggs and laying it in the gall flower. When this egg hatches, the larvae can feed on the gall flower. But when this insect is coming downside, right, its body gets stick with the pollen grains which are released by this anthers. When the same insect reaches to the other Ficus carica plant, those pollen grains will be sprinkled on the sterile, on the fertile ovaries, right? So it will ensure cross pollination. This mechanism is called as trapdoor mechanism, right? Ficus carica, that is fig plant, and Blastophaga wasp. Three types of flowers are there: fertile male flowers, fertile female flowers, and gall flowers. Gall flowers are the sterile flowers. The wasp lay down its eggs in the space of the gall flower, right? Eggs are protected, egg hatches, larvae will feed on the gall flowers. In return, the wasp is helping in the pollination because the pollen grains are going to stick on the body of the wasp, and when that wasp goes to some other flower, those pollen grains will be sprinkled on the stigma of the other flower, right? The last example is liver mechanism in case of salvia. It is a labiated family, which means the sepals are going to look like the lips, right? The sepals are arranged in such a manner that they look like the lips, right? In the center, there is ovary, stigma, and style, right? And there are anthers which are placed. But anthers arrangement is as such. Anther is dithecous. This is one theca of the anther. The connective tissue, which is a sterile tissue, is elongated. And here is the second lobe of the anther. This lobe of the anther is a fertile lobe of the anther. This is the sterile lobe of the anther. It is a sterile lobe of the anther. Here is present the nectar gland, right? So insect is coming towards this flower in search of the nectar gland. When it is trying to suck the nectar gland, it sits on the sterile lobe of the anther. So it sits on this sterile lobe of the anther to suck the nectar gland. So because of leverage difference, what happens? The fertile lobe of the anther comes downside, and so what happens? This fertile lobe of the anther comes down and it attaches with the body of the insect, and the pollen grains are sprinkled on the body of the insect. When the same insect goes to some other flower of the same species, again for the nectar gland, and sits on the sterile lobe of the anther, right? This, when it is trying to go inside, the pollen grains will be sprinkled on the stigma of the other flower. Thereby it is helping in cross pollination. This mechanism is called as liver mechanism. So these are some of the examples of entomophily, specialized examples. Orchidophrys, pseudocopulation, thinking that a flower is a female moth. Eucacella moth and euca flower. Moth is drilling the ovary of the flower. It is laying its seeds and sealing the ovary with the pollen grains. Ficus carica, fig plant having hypanthodium type of inflorescence, and the wasp is blastophaga. The flowers are gall flowers. And the fourth one is liver mechanism. This mechanism is called as trapdoor mechanism. And liver mechanism seen in salvia, which belongs to Labiatae family. That mechanism is called as liver mechanism. There are two types of anther lobes, one sterile and one fertile anther. Right, now we have to study about other types of pollinations, that is zoophily, myrmecophily, malapophily. Right? We have studied about different types of pollinations. We have studied abiotic components involved in pollination, that is wind and water. Biotic components such as insects. Pollination by insects is called as entomophily. There are few other types which we have to study briefly. That is ornithophily. It is pollination by birds, right? So if birds are the pollinators, pollinating agents, how the flowers should be? The flowers should be tubular or cup shaped or urn shaped, right? So they should be either tubular or cup shaped or urn shaped, right? So that the birds can put in their beak, right? So that the birds can insert their beak in the flower. Moreover, what the reward birds will get? Why birds are coming to the flower? They should get some reward, right? So flowers should possess nectar glands. There should be presence of nectar glands, which is a reward to the bird for pollination, right? So birds will peep their beak into the flower for the nectar present in the nectar gland, right? At that time, the pollen grains, which are sticky in nature, will stick to the beak of the birds, right? So pollen grains will stick, and when the same bird will go to some other plant, some other flower, and again search for the nectar gland, this pollen grains will fall on the stigma of other flower, right? So flowers should be tubular, cup shaped or urn shaped. Nectar glands should be present, and the flowers should be brightly colored to attract birds, right? So they should be brightly colored to attract birds. You have to remember the examples of ornithophily, that is pollination by birds. Bottle brush, right? Bombax is the plant where pollination is done by silk cotton, and Bigonia, where pollination is done by hummingbird. Agave is also a plant where pollination is done by bird, that is ornithophily, right? Then next type is chirapterophily. It is called as pollination is done by bats. Pollinating agent is bat, right? So bat, they come out at night, right? So how the flowers should be? The flowers should be night blooming flowers, right? So the flowers should be night blooming flowers. Because the pollination is done at night, the flowers will be dull colored, because at night the vision is obviously less. So bat gets attracted towards the flower by a very strong odor rather than the color or the shape of the flower, right? The odor can be of a rotten flesh or a rotten smell, which will attract the bats, right? Then the third thing is that the flower should be large and heavy enough, because the bat is going to sit on the flower for pollination, right? So the flower should be heavy and strong enough to take the weight of the bat. Then why the bats will come, right? What is the reason that bats will come to the flowers for the pollination? Right? They are doing the pollination by chance, but they should get some rewards. So insects should be present on flower, or there can be edible pollen grains. So bat is coming towards the flower through the smell, which is of a rotten flesh or some rotten or some foul odor, right? Or insects will be present on the flower, so bat is coming towards the flower to eat those insects, or the pollen grains are edible. The flower should be strong and heavy to support the weight of the bat. The flowers are night blooming and dull colored flowers. Examples: Adenosia, Higella pinnata and Anthocephalus. These are the plants in which pollination is done by bat. Higella pinnata, Adenosia and Anthocephalus. Right? Then the next one is Malacophyllae, where pollination is done by snails. Right? Snails are helping in pollination. Example is Lemna, Diptera and Chrysanthemum. Right? Lemna, Diptera and Chrysanthemum are the plants in which Malacophyllae is done. That is, pollination is done by snails. Then the next one is Ophiophyllae. Ophiophyllae means pollination is done by snakes. Snakes are involved in pollination. Right? Example is sandalwood tree. Right? So snakes are attracted towards the fragrance of the sandalwood tree, and in turn snakes are helping in pollination. Another example is Micella. Right? The next is Myrmecophyllae, right, where pollination is done by ants. Right? So these are the different agents which are also helping in pollination. Birds, Ornithophily, right? Bats, Chirapterophyllae, snail, Malacophyllae, snake, Ophiophyllae, and ants are helping, that is called as Myrmecophyllae. There are specialized features which are required by those plants to attract a particular pollinating agent. Right? In the next lecture, we will study about the process of pollen pistil interaction and fertilization.